Welcome everyone to another episode of Two Geeks and a Marketing Podcast, and as always we're here to keep you up to date with the latest news, tech, content and wisdom from the world of marketing. And as always, my co-host is a man on a mission to demystify digital marketing. He's the host of the Content Marketing Studio video podcast. Please welcome all the way from France, Monsieur Pascal Fintoni.
Well, thank you very much. And you've just heard from my co-host, Roger Edwards. I'm on a mission to keep marketing simple, the voice of the marketing and finance podcast, and the author of 𝗧𝗵𝗲 Marketing Plans.
Fantastic, Pascal. This is episode 91. Every episode, we now creep closer to the magic episode 100.
And we typically give people a quick, highlight of what we're going to talk about, but can I just go straight into film marketing?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. We are, at the time of recording, we're barely 2 weeks into the reveal of the title and the teaser trailer of the 5th installment of the Indiana Jones franchise.
Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny.
This is a first for us because typically when we review a film marketing campaign, Roger, we could either look back years, if not decades later. Sometimes we are a month into the campaign leading up to the premiere. This is just literally hot off the press. We're going to be reviewing merely a few months, but there's lots to talk about. And I apologize in advance. I think this could be a rather long film marketing segment.
Do you know, I just automatically assume that because the film is still 7 months away, and the campaign had only just started, that actually we wouldn't have much to talk about other than a trailer and a few photographs.
No. Not to mention the fact that this is potentially a massive payoff and reward for the fans. Lots of little nods to the earlier installments in both the poster design and the trailer. But before we do so, shall we move on to In the News?
Yeah, let's do that. Let's move on to In the News.
And we begin with travel company On the Beach, who claim that its truly differentiated customer proposition, which includes free airport lounge access and fast-track security, has helped the brand capture a greater share of the premium market.
The BBC is preparing to provide fewer linear broadcast services and a more tailored, joined-up online offer by the 2030s, as Director General Tim Davie warns the UK media is in a real period of jeopardy.
Well, it so happens that 43 million people watch 3 minutes or more of women's sport on linear TV this year. That's a record of 325 million hours viewed, according to new data from the Women's Sports Trust.
The Advertising Standards Authority, the ASA, has banned a BrewDog marketing email for misleading customers. The email claimed the brand's fruit-infused beers were one of your 5 a day.
Well, according to new research from the Chartered Institute of Marketing, almost half of the respondents are demanding changes to their working patterns to mitigate stress, whilst 52% say they fear burning out. Younger marketers are fearing burning out the most, with 59% saying it's a concern.
Fenwick is set to close its 130-year-old central London department store. The building and its adjoining property has been sold to 𝗧𝗲𝗃 Investments and will close in 2024. The company says it's going ahead with the sale of its retail space to help fund investment in its online business and other stores.
Well, 5 companies have been fined a cumulative £435,000 after targeting adults over 60 with almost 500,000 marketing calls that broke the law as the call recipients were signed up to the telephone preference service.
And finally, TikTok's advertising revenue is expected to have doubled in 2022, while its social media rivals have reported decreasing demand from advertisers this year. Maybe it's just the fact that everybody's moving away from Twitter, given what Mr. Musk is up to. Now, Pascal, normally what I do when we've been through these news items is I usually highlight in red the 3 that I want to talk about. And even though I've done that, I actually do want to talk about one that I haven't highlighted in red because it sort of caught my eye again when we were reading through that. And that's this BrewDog advert that's been banned by the Advertising Standards Authority. Now, on the one hand, yes, I agree. Absolutely. We shouldn't have misleading advertising. But seriously, though, we know that BrewDog is a bit of a tongue-in-cheek brand. You know, they did a few amusing adverts around the Qatar World Cup, which upset a few people. But do we seriously think that anybody genuinely believes that their beers, because they've got fruit infused into them, could be counted as one of your 5-a-day fruits? I mean, how far does advertising need to go to protect customers from their own stupidity?
Well, I mean, because ultimately, I've not seen the advert in fairness, but that would actually prevent you from doing any form of work of fiction. I mean, thinking about the time of year we're recording this, are you going to be stopped from doing Christmas adverts with Father Christmas because that's misleading people in thinking that it's a real character and a real person? You're right. It's almost as if people, working for the ASA, have missed the history of the brand, which is about jokes. It is about turning things upside down. It is also about, how they on occasion take on a cause and so on. Now, there's been obviously a time where Brewdog was making the headlines around staff dissatisfactions and the likes. But my memory, and we mentioned this brand many a time on the show, is always about that tongue-in-cheek approach. And I think that's one of them. So why it's then led to a ban, it's probably worth, looking into the details more.
Yeah, I mean, okay, let's just caveat it again. We don't think brands should be misleading their advertising. And I mean, in the past, one of the most famous adverts was 𝗓𝗲 𝗓𝗲 helps you work, rest and play. And eventually, I think they had to stop using that strapline because, again, the advertising standards said, well, you can't actually prove that's actually the case. It's just what you think. And okay, again, nobody truly believes that a can of beer is going to contribute towards your fruit intake. So I'm a bit torn about this one, but let's not labour the point. 5 companies have been fined a staggering amount of money for targeting adults over the age of 60. Now, this is possibly where we do get into areas where companies and brands need to be clobbered, and they have been clobbered financially here. They're breaking the law by cold calling all of these people with 500,000 marketing calls when those people were actually signed up to the telephone preference service. And for those of you who aren't in the UK, the telephone preference service is basically a list you can apply to put your phone number on, which effectively makes it illegal for anybody to phone you on that number. So you can't be cold called, or that's the theory. But as it says here, 5 companies have been conducting over 500,000 marketing calls to people who had already opted out of being targeted. So it just goes to show, on the one hand, we're talking about a company doing a tongue-in-cheek advert, which we genuinely don't think would mislead anybody, to hear companies genuinely are breaking the law in a pretty severe way by cold calling people who don't want to be cold called.
Well, what is interesting is that the telephone preference service, TPS, is actually works really well. I mean, I don't receive calls anymore, and part of that. So you've got 2 events here. You've got the access to the database.
Yeah.
You've got obviously the disregard of the TPS being ticked on that database, and kind of thinking, well, it'll be worth a knowing sum because we may get some sales, or it'll be worth the fine. But back to almost what we discussed last time in episode 90, it doesn't help actually with the reputation of marketing as a discipline, right?
I think that, we've said this on the show so many times that it's a privilege what we do, isn't it, as marketers, to communicate with our target audience. And we should never, ever abuse that privilege. Unfortunately, it seems that some companies do. And Fenwick, this big building, this London department store, closing so that they can reinvest the money into online businesses. This again, it's sort of sad, but also it's just part of the modern online world that we live in. Recently in Edinburgh, one of our flagship stores, Jenner's, is no longer open. Now, I was in Edinburgh a couple of weeks ago having a wander around the Christmas market, and for the first time that I can ever remember, Jenner's was boarded up. Jenner's had a reputation for having those amazing window displays. Everybody would come to see Jenner's every year because they would want to see what the window displays are going to be like. And then all of a sudden, here's the Jenner's building boarded up. Now, they are going to apparently turn it into a sort of combination of a hotel and an arcade. So it's not going to be closed completely. But this is a trend, isn't it? Again, of the online world, that some of these magnificent department stores and bricks and mortar buildings are no longer necessary.
You're absolutely right. I am a digital marketer through and through. But that said, as you read the news, I just felt like an incredible sense of nostalgia because I've visited the store many times when I was working in London, living near the city centre. Oddly, on Catch Up, I watched the series that was based, on the story. But for me, it's all part of the history. We need to know where we've come from to know in which direction we're going. So on one hand, you could say, well, that's sign of the times, or you could point fingers and say they should have reacted quicker, they should have made an improvement. But the disappearance of the evidence of where we've come from is what troubles me most. So I'm glad to hear that they're going to retain, its location and potentially the name, and they're going to make, use of the space, very, very differently. For me, what I see when I talk to my customers who work in B2C in particular is more also the issue around skills and skill shortage, because you no longer then have the platform for people to hone their skills from customer service point of view, from retail, display, everything you've mentioned in the real world, so to speak, so that you can kind of bring that as transferable skills and know-how into the world of e-commerce. So the way the manner in which you would lay out a website arcs back to the way in which you put things on display in a window. So if this goes completely, and give it 10, 20 years, when the new generation of traders comes along, they have no basis to make their decisions. And so that's where I consider myself to be slightly an anomaly, because I love the traditional way of doing business as a source of inspiration for the online world. So if Jenner's and Selfridges and many others disappear, where will people learn the arts and craft of their profession?
Yeah, and we had this conversation during the pandemic as well, that obviously city centres, which are usually where everybody goes to work, are effectively having to redefine themselves. And I just wonder whether, yes, they probably want to free up the money from this remarkable building and use that to invest into something online. But I wonder whether they tried hard enough to think of how they could have redefined the use of the building. Okay, the building might not have needed to have had all the stock, but maybe, some people still do like to go and browse, don't they? So maybe they could have done a better job of turning the building into a showcase for the goods. Maybe not having the stock there, people still have to order stuff online, but cater for or change the experience that people have of going into the store. Maybe turn it into a cultural centre or a big cafe or restaurant or something, and retain an image or samples of what you're selling. But to get rid of it completely just seems to me to be saying, well, that's the end of the high street. And I don't believe it is the end of the high street. I just think the high street needs to evolve. And I don't think a lot of people have put enough thought and work into what that evolution looks like.
No, absolutely. And just to close on that, if you think about back to the sense of history, it would make more sense for brands like Selfridges and many others to be leading the way when it comes to the online experience. And somehow they do not. And I think it's a real loss. It's a real pity.
But the high street, I'm sure, will continue. Edinburgh's Christmas market was packed to the rafters, so people are still flocking to city centres, even if they might not be going into department stores as much as they used to in the past. So, Pascal, enough within the news. Some interesting stuff there. But I think it's time to move on now to our content spotlights. Well, in this part of the show, Pascal and I bring to the table a piece of content. It could be a podcast, it could be a video, it could be an article from a magazine or an online magazine. So, Pascal, what have you got for us this week?
So this week it's an article. Confession time. This is not the article I chosen originally, but when I saw this title, I had to demote the other one and choose this one instead. Title is as follows: Are virtual events hurting your brand? By 𝗖𝗵𝗲 𝗁𝗍. This is, I think, a second or third appearance in the Content Spotlight, founder and CEO of Zen Media, and she wrote this article for Inc.com. If I share with you the sub-headline, if you will, of this article, I think you'll understand the thread through and the tone of the article she's written. Online events key during the pandemic need a makeover. And the timing could not be better. I've been very, very busy this month hosting conferences, workshops, discussions, and so on. And Roger and I, for viewers and listeners, we've been big advocates of hybrid events, not just one or the other. We've been saying for a very long time now that the online experience should not be a less alternative to the in-person event. We've done all sorts of things to really promote the case for online events to be well produced. And what 𝗖𝗵𝗲 is warning people about is that in general, there are many, many exceptions. And in fact, her article does a very good job to share that. She also share findings from a recent research and study sponsored by 𝗬𝗏, is that in general, people are either repeating the same formula over and over again, and we are now 2 years on from the start of the pandemic, or they are simply guilty, and I have some sympathy for that. They're simply guilty of not putting enough prep in because the impression that online events could give is that they don't require as much pre-event time and effort and budget than the in-person kind of version. So it's a warning. It's also a rallying call to really bang the drum for online / hybrid event. And I will leave people the pleasure of reading the article, but she's, through her own conclusion and the review of recent study, came up with 7 areas where you would really want to invest time, effort, and money because you're going to get a maximum return on effort. So in terms of where you want to invest for that makeover, to avoid essentially a sense of, well, I've been there, done that before, particularly for the attendees, you want to look at where you might introduce some unique activities, particularly what is possible online compared to in person. So unique activity is number 1. Number 2, you have to have great content. That is so, so important. Number 3, I love you. Wait for your reaction, Roger. A high energy host, which would be important. Number 4, personalized experiences for the attendees, seamless networking, compelling speakers, and finally, a truly immersive virtual environment. So with respect, just turning up to watch somebody do the best to stare at the webcam and present a few slides is not what we mean by putting together a virtual event. So immersive virtual environment is important. Again, not a very long article to read, but one that is going to really make you think, and one that I would highly recommend you circulate around the office. And 𝗖𝗵𝗲 Hyder's kind of call to action, if you will, Roger, is to get the team together, go through the article, and start to plan your event very, very differently. Because if you're not careful, people, the attendees, the organizers, and so on, are going to start to dismiss it as something that is nowhere near as good as in person. Or they're going to start to use this phrase, which I detest, the Zoom fatigue. Yeah. There is not such a thing as Zoom fatigue. There is just bad event fatigue. That's what is happening right now.
Yeah, and now there's so much that resonates with me on this, Pascal. As you know, I've just finished one of my big conferences, Protection Review, which was in London at the Landmark Hotel just over a week ago. And we've tried doing online events during the pandemic, and we had a big success replicating a proportion of what we do in a live environment. But we did what a lot of the things that you and I have discussed here before. We cut a lot of the online talks down to very short, 10-minute segments so that there was constant change to keep people's attention. But one of the things that really resonated with me going back to the live event in a real hotel with a real stage, with a real room, is that, yes, virtual events work, and we can create some great stuff if we follow the rules that you've been talking about here, shared by 𝗖𝗵𝗲 in her article. But what I genuinely don't think now, having done both virtual and live events, is that you can ever truly replicate the magic that happens when real people get together during the coffee break, during the lunch break, in the pub afterwards, or if there's a dinner in the evening, at the dinner in the evening, or at the party afterwards, when people, prompted by what they've heard from the speeches, actually start throwing ideas around, counter ideas, debating it. That's where those real magical conversations happen. And I just genuinely don't think that we can replicate that in an online environment.
Yes and no. So what, the article, I've studied is what is unique to the in-person event and what is unique to the online environment. And there are things you can do in one environment and you can't in the other. And I think for me that's the risk, isn't it? Is that people keep comparing in-person event and all the things you can do and say, well, see, you can't do that online. So online is a lesser alternative. And that's the wrong conversation to be having. It's almost like saying somebody, aha, see, you can't get Spanish food in a French restaurant. I'm like, well, so what, we should be in a position to do now is look at both scenarios, get excited by both, and kind of go somebody, what we should do is have a program where we do in person and we do it online. But the distinction and the differences are so clear to others that you can look forward to that diverse experience. And if I take you back to something that I know we've not mentioned on the in the news, but the On the Beach travel company, where not only do they have a package, but it's clearly defined and clearly communicated. And I think maybe, and you and I, could reflect on that for next year. Maybe it's about the labeling. Maybe it shouldn't be called an online event, because then your mind is taken to going back to, well, I know what event means. Event means what you've just described a moment ago. But what are we saying about virtual experiences that are unique? You couldn't replicate it. You can't do this in person.
Very good point. Very good point.
So what about yourself? What was your finding for the content spotlights?
Well, this week, Pascal, I'm talking about another book. Yes, I do seem to have suddenly started reading more books and indeed listening to more books as well. I've had quite a few audible books in my earbuds recently. But this week, I want to talk about a book by a gentleman called Austin Kleon. I think that's how you pronounce it. K-L-E-O-N, Kleon. Austin Kleon has written a book called Show Your Work. Now, this guy has written a few books of a similar vein, and they're quite short. This is just over 100 pages long, so it's quite possible that you could polish this off in half an afternoon or half an evening. It's very easy to read. It's short and it's snappy and it's simple, just like you and I like it, with lots and lots of examples. Now, his previous book was interesting in that it encouraged people to steal other people's ideas. Now, given what we said at the top of the show today about integrity and something like that, you might think, well, hold on a second, is that actually a really good thing to do, steal other people's ideas? But actually, if you think about it, that's sort of what happens in all lines of business, isn't it? Somebody will come up with an idea, the pioneer will come up with an idea, and then somebody else comes along and does a slightly better version of it or reinvents it in a slightly different way. And you see that throughout history. The original Model T Ford was very successful, but many other cars came after it. Low-cost airlines, the first one, Southwest Airlines in the United States, rapidly followed by iterations across Europe, like EasyJet, Ryanair. So somebody has an idea and then somebody else steals it or modifies it. So his previous book was all about having a look at how you can get good ideas from other people and then actually build upon them. This book, though, in a similar way, is sort of saying, how can you increase your online presence by showing people what you do? Now, what he's not really saying here is if you are a cupcake manufacturer or you are a car manufacturer, it's not just a question of posting photographs of your cupcakes or posting photographs of your cars. It's actually showing all the aspects of your work. And that means going behind the scenes and creating little videos, maybe TikToks or maybe Reels or more in-depth videos for YouTube. Or it could just be, instead of showing the cupcake finished, do a recipe video. Now, this might sound like the bleeding obvious, Pascal, but when you read this book and he just goes through these quick fire examples, you think, do you know what? I very rarely actually do this still. I'm always promoting the content. I'm always saying, here's the article I've written, here's the video I've recorded, here's the podcast I've recorded. I very rarely actually say, this is how I recorded the podcast, or this is how I made the video, this is how I wrote the article, this is the process that I go through when I write an article, this is the process I go through when I make a video. Now, you and I have talked about such things on the show, but this book is a real wake-up call for saying, tell people how you do things as well as tell people what you do. Because if you do that, they're going to get to know you in a different way than if you're just coming across as somebody pushing product all the time. And sometimes it can be fascinating to go behind the scenes. And it might sound a bit boring. Well, if I share my process for going through an article, which might be, well, I'll come up with a topic, I'll research the topic, then I'll write it, then I'll edit it, then I'll find a title, whatever it might be. But some people will gain from that because they'll learn about your process. And I think, I'm embarrassed to quote him, but didn't Gary Vaynerchuk once say, document, don't create? Because a lot of the time he said, if you actually just document what you do, you're actually creating better content than you would if you focused on actually creating content. So probably don't want to say much more on this, except just a few chapter headings. As I say, it's a very short book, 126 pages, in fact, on the Kindle there. And again, it's thinking about the process, not the product. Share something small every day. Something, like I've said, this is part of my process. This is where I get my ideas from. This is how I go about writing an article. As you would expect, chapter 5, tell good stories. There's an absolutely fascinating example in there, which I'd love to tell you about, but we haven't really got time for it. So please do read this book and go and read chapter 5 and just love it for the fact that he talks about stories. There's also a few warnings in there. Don't turn into human spam. You'll have to get knocked down sometimes. You might share something that people might think is the bleeding obvious, or they think, well, why are you doing that? But eventually people will get to know you a lot better, and they'll doubly get to appreciate you for the ultimate products that you provide if you give them much more of an insight into how you go about doing your work.
Thank you so much. Isn't that just fascinating that certainly and I'm sure it's the case for many of our viewers and listeners, I can never tire of hearing a different perspective on storytelling and reminders of really sensible, practical stuff. But we live such a busy life and we are just consuming so much content. Sometimes you need someone like, this to ask you to pause for a moment. I think the appeal of something that is short, that could be read over a weekend, and you can take action, those kind of almost survival guide or field expedition guide, a style, and show your work. I mean, what an amazing title.
Yes.
So your quote for Gary Vaynerchuk is spot on. That's exactly what he said, document or comment. Don't always think you have to create something new, but document your kind of the inner workings of your organization. A couple of things that I would add to that in terms of my own work. I sometimes will say, and this morning I was giving some coaching on video marketing and the tension of, really, you want me to video this and publishing? Who's going to care? And the reminder that your ordinary is someone else's extraordinary. And that's really important. What we take as our day job? And so what's the point of me sharing how I plan an article would really be quite a revelation for somebody else because of our expertise. And how do you do what you do? It's the question that I ask during my workshop, which is akin to show your work. How do you do what you do? When we follow your advice, and that of Austin as well, it helps us move away from sharing statements to sharing stories. And that, to me, is what's so exciting about this book. So thank you. I've been struggling to put together a Christmas list, by the way, because my family keeps asking me, what do I want? So this is now the second book I can add to that. Thank you so very much, Roger.
No problem at all. So, Pascal, we are going to move on now to our marketing, tech and apps section. And this week, it's going to be slightly different. So, Pascal, normally in this part of the show, you and I bring to the table a couple of apps that we've been discovered during the week, and we share those apps and we just debate them as normal. Now, interestingly enough, in the past, you and I have often inadvertently or serendipitously chosen similar apps or similar topics at least. But this week, we actually went and chose exactly the same app that we wanted to talk about. Now, it's funny because I came along to the show notes page last night on the OneDrive, and I copied and pasted that I got in a Word document, typed it in, pressed the paste button, and just corrected a few bits of punctuation. And that's when I just looked below it and thought, uh-oh, here's Pascal, and he's done exactly the same. In fact, the URLs that you pasted in are exactly the two URLs that I pasted. And that was when I thought, you know what, we are going to have to talk about the same thing this week, because we've obviously homed in on this together as being a very important topic. So Pascal, this week we're going to talk about ChatGPT. What do you think about ChatGPT?
Yeah, so the reason it was chosen is both because this was making the headlines in the UK, the US, and in France at the same time. You know, there was massive PR push. In fact, I think people crashed the site for a few hours and they had to add to the server capacity. So the AI-driven chatbot developed by OpenAI, where you can use normal day-to-day conversation to ask questions and also give instructions about how the answers, can be shaped. So I've spent an entire morning, in fact, my line in the show notes is my morning with ChatGPT. And this is where I'm left with. I think that genuinely, I'm going to have to take issue with the media and the consultants who have been describing this as a way to cheat and create content for your blogs and this and the other. Because I think that this is actually so short-sighted and doing a disservice to the amazing work of OpenAI. I think this is essentially a different way of learning, a different way of being reminded about knowledge, where you ask a question in plain English. You can even give instructions as to how you want the answers to be shaped. It could be in the shape of an essay, of a song, of a poem, and you can have fun with that. But what I found is that I was taking pleasure in reading the answer as it was showing itself as text in conversation style. And I was thinking that would be amazing when you have a reader. So for people who need to be able to listen to the answer because they can't read and so on, this is going to be such an enjoyable experience. So at first I was dismissive on this idea of, the cheat, the hack. This is how content marketing is going. And I thought, actually, people who were writing these articles of that time have missed the point completely. This is lazy journalism. This is actually a different way to be reminded of information that you know already, or to learn something brand new.
Now, my take when I first saw this, and as you know, and I've spoken about this in Marketing, Tech and Apps recently, is I've tested out a few of these AI content generators. Write me an article on marketing strategy, or write me an article on airlines, or write me an article on whatever it might be. And I've been very disappointed with some of the resultant content. And I previously come to the conclusion that actually these AI content generators are so far away from where they need to be that us humans don't actually need to worry too much yet. Having said that, when I saw and started playing around with ChatGPT, I immediately found that the content it was creating felt a lot more accessible, because maybe it's in that chatty style and it's very simple. And as you say, you can define, write me an article about marketing in the shape of a Shakespeare sonnet, and it'll do a pretty good job. Write me a poem about a marketing guy called Pascal, and it will do that in a poem. And I loved that. And I thought, wow, maybe I was a bit wrong in the past about the ability of AI to create something new like this. And actually, maybe for the first time, me as a content creator is feeling a little bit, maybe this is going to be a bit more of a threat. But what I then started to do was to dig a little bit deeper. So like, write me an article in 500 words about marketing strategy, which it duly did. And as you know, at the end of it, Pascal, it says you can try again. Now, I tried the same thing about 5 different times for a marketing strategy article, and it gave me a different article every time. So that was a good thing. But it was all pretty much the same, extremely generic stuff. It didn't really go into any detail. It was very grey. It was very mediocre, dare I say. And I then felt a little bit more like I did before, that me, the human being, wasn't under threat here. Maybe ChatGPT would come up with a better baseline for an article, which I could then add my personality in and add a lot more detail and maybe some more up-to-date statistics, which I think the other AI that I've played with couldn't do. But I still think that what we've got here, whilst the interface might be quite fun, and it is really interesting to get it to write an article about a cat driving a train or something like that, I still think we've still got a long way to go when it comes to long-form content.
Hence why I took issue with the headlines and the media and the consultants out thinking, you are misrepresenting, talking about misleading people, you are misrepresenting and misinforming people. This is not about cheating and writing text. This is about learning top level information. This is essentially the 2 options. Do you want to go on Google, Yahoo and Bing and sort it out for yourself, or do you want to have someone, literally a chat that line by line reminds you of, I did a search, Roger, on the history of the internet, and there was stuff I'd forgotten about. And it was fun to see the information presenting itself and so on. I would agree with you. I think it was Mark Asquith, one of the people from Captivate, who said he reminded him of someone from university who copied and pasted stuff from online to try and pretend that was their work, because it is very, very grey. There's no storytelling, there's no warmth, there's no anecdote. One thing that I learned through my attempts, you can specify, please add quotes or stats from experts, and they'll do that. But I have found the stats to be old-ish, as in they don't seem to have anything beyond 2018-20, which are kind of interesting. So then I had a chat with ChatGPT, asking, well, where are you from? Where are you doing, and so on. So I got some interesting answers, and I said to him, where do you get the information from for your response? Because I did write an article about Pascal Fintoni, and according to ChatGPT, I am a singer that was born in Barcelona. So basically, the reply was that this is about natural language that is taken from training data. So the essence being that the OpenAI team has been training ChatGPT. Every time we use the platform and react and respond and so on, it learns as well. But it is not getting its information from the internet. It is getting this information from a data set that has been obviously put together by OpenAI. Then I thought, I wonder if I could ask ChatGPT to write a song about Roger Edwards. Because I know that you love music, your knowledge of music is absolutely incredible. So I say, write a short song about Roger Edwards, the founder and owner of Roger Edwards Marketing. And this is what I got back from ChatGPT. Roger Edwards was a man with a dream to build a marketing firm that was supreme. He started small with just a desk and a chair, but soon his clients came from far and wide. They were all aware of the excellent work he did with strategy and flair. Despite the challenges he faced along the way, Roger never wavered. He kept pushing every day. And now his legacy lives on in the work of his team, who continue to provide top-notch marketing services, all part of the dream that Roger had all those years ago.
Set to the music of Genesis, no doubt. I mean, I did a similar thing, which I didn't save. Write me a story about a marketing guy called Pascal Fintoni. I shall finish this off, though, by just an interesting little segue. I did come across an article in Marketing Week about ChatGPT, and you know who I'm going to say wrote this, don't you? Mark Ritson wrote an article about ChatGPT, and he is saying, because some people have said this will replace Google. And his argument in the article is, no, this won't replace Google. Google might actually start using something like this, or maybe even buy it eventually and use it, because it's a lovely interface. And wouldn't it be nice for, if you did a Google search, it sort of talked to you like ChatGPT did. But Mark Ritson says, no, Google is too well established and has fingers in so many pies, like email and presentations and local search and this, that, and the other. It won't replace Google. But then the byline at the bottom of the article was the best thing. It just said, I'm not going to tell you whether this article was actually written by Mark Ritson, or whether Mark Ritson just told ChatGPT to write an article about ChatGPT in the style of Mark Ritson, which I thought was very, very clever way to sign off the article. So no doubt we could talk a little bit more about ChatGPT for the rest of the afternoon, Pascal, but I think we've got to go back in time now. We've got to set the controls of the TARDIS, fire up the flux capacitor, and head back to this week in history.
In 1974, disaster film The Towering Inferno, starring Steve McQueen and Paul Newman, is released. The score was composed and conducted by a certain John Williams.
In 1977, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, directed by Steven Spielberg and starring Richard Dreyfuss, Melinda Dillon, Bob Balaban and Francois Truffaut, opens in 270 theatres across the US.
And that same year, the Queen unveils the new underground link from central London to Heathrow, the first from the capital city to its major airport. And this year, the Elizabeth line opened, making the journey even easier.
And in 2011, Google Buzz is discontinued and replaced by Google+. In 2017, AIM, the AOL Instant Messenger, is shut down. And in 2019, Yahoo announces that Yahoo Groups will no longer be supported. Just goes to show tech comes and goes. Pascal, can I go back to 1977, not to Close Encounters, but to that underground link between London and Heathrow? Because I just find this whole thing really fascinating. I've always been a little bit of a train geek, and I have to say that I spent the good part of 10 years in the early part of my career going to London at least twice a week, flying down from Edinburgh to Heathrow Airport and getting on the Piccadilly line at Heathrow, and then it would take a good hour and 20, an hour and a half to get from Heathrow to Bank Station, which is where the office that I used to work out of was located. So all in all, that was quite a harrowing journey to do because of the flying down and the hanging about, and then that clanky tube journey taking so long. Then, of course, at the end of the 90s, along came something called the Heathrow Express, which was a hell of a lot better. It would take you from Heathrow to Paddington Station within 15 minutes, and that made a significant improvement to the journey to London. Having said that, you would still then have to get from Paddington Station on the tube, whether it was the Bakerloo line or the Jubilee, whatever, to get to your final destination. And by this time, of course, you could then start flying into London from EasyJet down into Stansted or Luton or to Gatwick and then into City. So it becomes a little bit less of a moot point. But last week, for the first time, I went to Heathrow and got the new Elizabeth line from Heathrow Terminal 5. It also goes from Terminal 4 as well, right the way into central London, through Paddington Station, into central London, and I ended up getting off at Tottenham Court Road, which is absolutely bang centre of London. So for the first time since 1977, when the Queen originally opened the first underground link, now you can finally do something really quick. I think it took about 25 minutes to go from Heathrow to Tottenham Court Road, and it was so comfortable because these are really modern trains, very smooth. They are very long trains as well. In fact, the stations, Pascal, are almost double the length of a normal underground station. And when I got on the train at Heathrow, I deliberately walked all the way to the front of the train. It took me a good 5 minutes to do that walk to the front of the train. And when you get on the train and look back from the front, the carriages are open all the way through, so there's no little interconnecting doors. They are as wide at the joiny bit. I can't remember what the joiny bit's called. You know what I mean, though. So you can literally, it's like looking into one of those infinity mirrors directly down, and it was just phenomenal. And within 25 minutes, I was at Tottenham Court Road. So wow, this is what happens in 50 years.
You just cannot, underplay convenience and access. And I remember in my younger days working travel and discussing, with airports, their need and them fighting and pleading with governments and local governments about connections, whether it was the underground, whether it was the bus and so on. You've got to, I will literally choose an airport on the basis of that connection. Can I just go from the terminal to a train or another to get into where I need to be? I remember once I got so lucky, I managed to get a train from Brittany, where some time ago, all the way to Charles de Gaulle Terminal 3 to then fly into London. And just the avoidance of having to kind of hop on something to then go into another one is just so important. And you can translate that to the online world. For me, the historical item that I wanted to kind of quickly reflect on is what you read out about Google Buzz, Google Plus, 𝗖𝗄𝗏, Yahoo Group, and you could add a few to those. And so I love to try things out. I was on Google Buzz when it started. I was certainly on Google Plus. I used to have training courses on Google Plus. And it's just this reflection of why is it that those networks have not worked when others have, like you can quote Facebook and TikTok and the other. So I've been reflecting on it. I've been researching. I did ask ChatGPT about it. And it would seem that potentially, the reason why those that you've named have not worked is that ability for them to be used well and for this to be a good experience on a mobile phone. It seems to have been one of the many kind of challenges that they didn't seem to cover. But I certainly was very fond of Google Plus. Going back to 2016, 15, when I had my courses, and remember the Google circles and all that kind of stuff. But it's just they go, and when they go, literally you get an announcement. That's it. We're going to discontinue. Download your data now, or else. And I was in Yahoo groups with my family, 𝗖𝗏. I was surprised though. I didn't realize that it'd been that late. I thought 𝗖𝗏 had been discontinued way before 2017.
Yeah, I know. And I was the same as you, Google Plus. I remember a very famous content creator. I will not name him because it probably sounds a bit embarrassing, but a very famous content creator. I remember him doing a very early YouTube video saying a lot of people are on Facebook, a lot of people are on LinkedIn, but I believe the future is Google Plus, and I am going all in on Google Plus. And he did. He went all in on Google Plus, and 6 months later, it had all gone.
It's not funny, but our world, of digital marketing is about this ability to, what's the expression, fail fast. That was never our decision to kill Yahoo groups and all the others, but they tend to do that. And it's just fascinating, to kind of see how, because of good marketing, the early days of a platform, let's use Google Plus again, there's a real sense of excitement. I must confess, over the years, Roger, I've learned to be just a bit more patient.
Yes.
And kind of go, well, we'll see. But by all means, let's test, let's push, let's find out a bit more about it. But don't be surprised if within 2-3 years, if not sooner, it goes.
Absolutely right. Okay, Pascal, let's bring ourselves right back up to date now. And we're going to head into the next section of the show, and that is our creators' shout-outs. Okay, Pascal, who are you going to give a shout-out to this week?
Oh, listen, I'm really, really pleased about this inclusion this week. Moira Barnes, sales strategist and coach, is currently, as we are recording this and publishing it, hosting the 12 sales tips in 12 days. arcing back to the 12 days of Christmas, how to sell in a recession. So what she's doing is over the next 12 days, today being episode number 3, when she's traveling, which is lovely, so literally she's in different locations all the time, she spends 10 minutes a day telling you about, literally how to set up your sales strategy and approach for next year, and literally being able to sell smarter in 2023. So what I like about it is the brevity. So it's a challenge. We all know that, 10 minutes on the specific questions, but these are their practical, achievable tips. You don't have to be an expert, but perhaps, it wasn't the intention, but the element of changing location every day is a wonderful part of the storytelling and the backdrop. It's kind of every time is a bit different. So far, she's done episode 1. Setting the scene, how to thrive during a recession. Episode 2 was about how to make the sale all about your customers. Roger, you're going to love this one. And today was how to spot when your customer is ready to buy. So these are just 9 out of the 12 sales tips in 12 days.
I love it when people do things like this. I mean, again, it creates that, it's that sort of like an ongoing listicle, isn't it? But there's the anticipation of what's next, but you can always see that there's a destination in hand as well, which gives you that extra motivation to stick with it. Now, my creator shout out this week, I have to apologize, Pascal. Normally we do try to go for people who we sort of know, or people who are within our immediate marketing circle, but this week, ironically, when I was looking at that article I referred to earlier by Mark Ritson, I came across this week's Marketunist cartoon from Tom Fishburne, and this one absolutely made me wet myself, rolling around on the floor, laughing my head off sort of thing, if you like. And it's one of those cartoons that you don't even need to see the cartoon to get it. So here's a scenario. Tom Fishburne has drawn a picture of executives sat round a table in a boardroom, and one of the people sat round the table in the boardroom is describing the marketing plan, and the words are, "Our marketing plan is simple. We just need to focus our CRM and CMS on ABM for higher CLV and lower CAC, whilst AB testing our CTA and UX for CRO, and hope we get from WOM, but don't ask me about ROI." And then one of the other guys at the back of the room goes, "WTF?" And I mean, that just, it just sums up everything that I fought against in my career of trying to fight complexity in marketing. All those 3-letter acronyms absolutely just highlights where it can be. So Tom, thank you for giving me a big laugh. What I did find was really funny is that in the comments section below, somebody had actually taken the trouble of spelling out what all of those 3-letter acronyms meant, which sort of underlines the point even more, doesn't it?
Do you know what? For people who think that both Roger Selection and the Cartoonists have gone too far, no, they have not. I have witnessed this happening in meetings, whether in person or on a Zoom call. And I remember when the consultant left the Zoom call, I was left with a client who just went WTF. And, so yes, this is beautiful. Well done.
All right, Pascal, we've been building up to this moment throughout the whole of the show. You teased it well in the introduction. This week's film marketing is about to break. Well, Pascal, less than 2 weeks ago, a trailer dropped for a new film which is going to be released in the summer of 2023. A film that I never ever thought would ever get made. The 5th Indiana Jones film, Indiana Jones 5, The Dial of Destiny. Let's have a look at the first teaser trailer.
I miss the desert. I miss the sea. And I miss waking up every morning, wondering what wonderful adventure the new day will bring to us.
Those days have come and gone.
Perhaps not.
in magic. But a few times in my life, I've seen things I can't explain. And I've come to believe it's not so much what you believe. It's how hard you believe it.
Who is this man?
I'm her godfather.
Related.
Get back!
Oh, Pascal, the imagery, the fedora, the whip, the music. What do you think?
I'm actually quite emotional. I watched this teaser trailer a lot.
Yeah.
And do you know when you hear the piano chord, being played, but very slowly, there's something melancholic about it. And then when you realize that this is it, this is the last one with Harrison Ford. This is also the last film scored by John Williams, who essentially retired last year. This is the last one that George Lucas and Steven Spielberg will be involved in as exec producer. To me, this is like the end of an era. So I just find myself to be quite emotional watching this, coupled with a sense of dread of thinking, please don't mess it up.
Well, that is the whole big thing, isn't it? Because like everybody, I was an absolutely massive fan of the first three films. I thought the fourth one was a bit of a miss. I mean, it was entertaining. It was good. It was good fun and, action packed, but it just didn't quite have the magic to me of the first three. What I am hoping with this one is that they will not make similar mistakes and they will be able to recapture the epic scale, the humor, the storytelling and the action of those original three films. But I have to say, I'm a little bit concerned because, let's face it, hats off to him, no pun intended. Our Harrison is not exactly a spring chicken, is he? He must be in his late 70s, maybe even his early 80s now. Is it realistic to expect Indy jumping around and swinging off chandeliers and driving motorbikes and elephants and goodness knows what? How far are we going to be having our expectations stretched here, or will they compensate for his age like they did in the fourth movie by having the younger Indy, if you like? Although that younger Indy doesn't seem to be part of the cast, so I don't know where that's going to go.
Yeah, no, it's a tough one. For me, we will talk about the marketing very soon, viewers and listeners.
Yeah.
But for me, it's the I still have with me, and is the case, the disappointment, of course, of the last three installments of Star Wars, where there was this hijacking of the franchise and our beloved characters to introduce the next generation. And so we know from the teaser and from the very, very short synopsis that, in addition to Indy, we have his goddaughter, who essentially is going to be that new generation. But what I'm saying, with complete humility to the filmmakers, don't make it about her with respect. We're not there yet. We make it for installment number 6 could be about her, but please make this about Indiana Jones and Salah and all the others. Please don't kill him at the end of the film like you've done with all the others. That's not really what we want to see here. And what we need is a summer blockbuster where the whole family can go in and essentially follow a treasure hunt. We need the dark cave, we need the traps, we need the potentially the monsters, the tribes, and the threats and so on. I love the storyline. I have to say I have more faith in this one than the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, although of course Raiders will always be my favorite. This idea of the space race, the using Nazi engineers and scientists to help the US and so on, and all that backdrop. I find the storyline a lot more interesting. And to your point about your wish list, I think the teaser trailer seems to suggest that they have got all the components right for this film.
Yeah, and that's what I'm hoping is going to be the case. So earlier when we were introducing this right at the beginning of the show, Pascal, I was actually quite surprised when you said there's a hell of a lot of marketing already happened, because obviously the teaser trailer's only been out for a couple of weeks, and I've seen a few posters and I've seen a few tweets, but I think your research has shown that there's a hell of a lot more to talk about.
Yeah, so the three elements, I mean, to begin with, just for ourselves, I made the list of the online platforms. So there's a official Facebook page, so there's an official Twitter account, there's an official Instagram, there's Lucasfilm, who seems to take the lead with regard to the teaser trailer. There is a hashtag, of course, Indiana Jones. There isn't a website, though. In fact, when you type in, or when you click on the link that reads indianajones.com, it takes you to the Facebook page. So I've been wondering whether this is a temporary measure until they get the official website sorted, although that feels a little late now. So what's your view on that?
Well, I mean, again, there must be a website on its way. There must be. I mean, you couldn't possibly not have a website. But, again, maybe, they've decided that social media is the way and that people don't want websites. But if they're going to be producing, a whole series of different forms of content, from posters to TV spots to fully fledged trailers, and I'm sure there'll be some very interesting treasure hunty type games going on at some point coming along. So a website, to me, would be the absolute essential hub for an indie marketing campaign.
For people listening from Lucasfilm and Walt Disney Studios, Roger and I would be more than happy to take the lead on the website design and management. So that was me. So then you have what I've called, Roger, the unofficial teaser campaign. So filming started in 2021, the summer of 2021. One thing I didn't know at all, actually, when I did the research, is that this film was originally, perhaps it was ambitious, planned for 2019.
Wow.
They wanted to try and coincide it with the 50th anniversary of Lucasfilm, and then we know what happened, obviously then that time. So they filmed between the summer 2021 to the spring of 22. And people in the UK were treated with many kind of appearances and sights of Harrison Ford and cast and crew across the UK and Scotland. They also filmed in Italy and Morocco, of course, sets, and primarily in the UK as well. So you had actually quite an extensive coverage in the press, TV and radio. Nothing from the official kind of channels of Lucasfilm and Walt Disney, but certainly fans and the media kept sharing pictures of filming taking part.
Yeah.
I shared with you back in the days that there was a break during the lockdown measures during the pandemic. So we went up to Bamburgh Castle. And when we arrived, Bamburgh Castle was closed because of filming. And I was maybe the only person that was pleased about it.
Everybody else was fed up.
So, I mean, literally people were spotting Harrison Ford cycling in North Shields and some parts of Scotland. I was so jealous. But moving on to the official teaser campaign. So no surprise there. This one started during Star Wars Celebration, 26 May 2022. In addition to talking about and answering questions about Star Wars and the franchise, Harrison Ford was on stage to introduce the very first official image. Can you imagine? Just an image.
Just an image.
To the fans. It's been seen before, but you're very good at this, actually, Roger. Would you mind describing the image, particularly to our listeners?
Yeah, I mean, you've got the silhouette of Indiana Jones walking across what looks like an extremely dodgy rope bridge in the middle of a very dark cavern, but his silhouette is illuminated by a shaft of sunlight beaming down from the heavens, and he's just getting these feet to the edge of this rope bridge, i.e. getting to safety. But you would have imagined that at any moment this rope bridge could come clattering down. Or indeed, again, he may just be freeze framed. He might even have been running. And if the camera pans out from this, there may be a horde of swordsmen chasing him across the rope bridge. Who knows? But
to your point, it's so incredibly simple, but so evocative.
Yes.
And everything is there, the sense of threat, of jeopardy, dark caves, treasure hunting, not knowing what's around the corner. What is really bittersweet as well about the Star Wars Celebration of May is they were celebrating the 90th birthday of John Williams. John Williams also played a brand new score, which is the theme of Elena, who is Indiana Jones' goddaughter.
Yeah.
But also at the same time on stage, John Williams said, "This is it. I'm now going to retire. This is my last contribution to the world of cinema." I don't know. I just get very emotional thinking about it.
So many amazing scores for so many amazing films over the year, but then he's put the time in, hasn't he? I think he probably deserves to have a bit of a rest in his twilight years.
No, absolutely. I mean, one of my biggest regret was to never be around or never having the time to go and see a concert with him being the conductor. I think you and I tried once to go to Edinburgh, didn't we? There was a tribute concert, and somehow may have been COVID. We didn't manage to go there.
Yeah.
So nothing much happens actually from May onwards, apart from the press and the media reacting to the photo. I mean, with people writing or doing like 2-hour video reviews of just the one photo, which is brilliant. That's what it's all about. And of course, recounting their favorite moments in the other 4 installments. To them, we have to wait till September 2022, the 16th of September, for the Disney Fan Club Expo.
Yeah.
Again, so jealous of our US friends. And there they were able to show footage, so moving images of moments in the film, including, and I think was probably part of the tactic to appease minds, the de-aged Harrison Ford in action scene, which I thought was very clever. And at the time confirmed the return of Jonathan Rhys-Davies as Salah.
Yeah, now that is interesting, the de-aged Harrison Ford, isn't it? Because that suggests there'll be flashbacks.
Yes, I believe so. And the teaser, I mean, it goes so fast. I mean, only because I've watched the teaser like 20 times. There's moments where you can see a younger Harrison Ford.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing, technology has moved on from, all the other attempts. So it should be fine. Clearly, judging by the reaction, the comments on the internet, people have reacted reasonably well to the de-aging process. Perhaps one news item that didn't get the audience to react so well was, of course, on stage, put on the spot during a question Q&A, Harrison Ford confirmed that this was the last time he would be playing the character. So again, back to this sense of nostalgia and melancholy that's going to accompany, I think, the movie. Never say never again. Absolutely. So the next element that built up from that was, which is something that we reported, you and I, often, is the Empire magazine exclusive campaign. I'm guessing, Roger, there must be one per territory or per country. That must be the US/UK campaign. I'm assuming in different languages they have different magazines doing that, where they have exclusive photos, stills. Yeah. They have the subscriber only art cover, which is always just stunning. And then what they've done, which you and I have reported often in other kind of movie marketing reviews, the character spotlights. Yes. Yeah. I mean, again, the character spotlights we've talked about even in recent reviews of films like Knives Out and Death on the Nile. It's just a great way to showcase the cast with beautiful imagery and beautiful graphics. I think what the photos show as well is the quality of filming, but also in some of them, if we look at the Mads Mikkelsen photo, who plays the kind of ex-Nazi scientist 𝗏𝗏, that kind of noir effect, and the way that is being lit and so on. Yeah, and he also, because he's got his steel rim glasses on, circular steel rim glasses and hat, he looks a lot like the character out of the original Raiders of the Lost Ark film. Yeah, no, absolutely right. You can't help it. And I think that's what they're going to do. Yeah. I know that we have to make the comparison because the production companies are the same. But when they looked at The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker, the producers confessed that they were very, very concerned about criticism of fan service. Yes. I've got the feeling that that's not the issue with this one. They're going to give us what we want. Yes. Yeah. That hopefully is what we're going to get. So then, as you mentioned at the start of this segment, we are moving on to the 1st of December, where at the same time, we have the date, we have the title, and we have the teaser trailer.
Yeah. And some posters as well, pointing to June the 30th.
Yeah, that poster is something that I would love to have as a print. We have, kind of, it's quite a close-up, isn't it, of Indy today, or as in, I think 1969, is in a cave. You have some dust falling on the rim of this hat, and you've got that unique calligraphy that they've used as part of the artwork and the brand positioning of June 30. So we're not going to do an analysis of the trailer. Others have done so, and I've covered it extensively. But were there moments in the trailer when you went, "Ooh, that's exciting," or that reminds me of something?
Yeah, it's deliberately created to do that, isn't it? I mean, yes, teaser trailers are supposed to tease, and you get a little element of the plot. But what they've had to do here is try to satisfy everybody. So they've had to satisfy the absolute off the rocker, hardcore fans. They've got to satisfy the family audience who love Indiana Jones films but don't obsess about them like you and I would do. And they've got to attract people who've maybe never seen an Indiana Jones film. And that's a hell of a lot of audiences to crack in one trailer. And I think they've probably got the balance right on this occasion.
Absolutely. In the green room, you mentioned something to me, and I have to say I had to quickly watch it again before recording, where you told me that there is a moment in the trailer, it's like a split of a second, where I think they are in a submarine underwater. But you told me, oh, that looks like a little nod to Star Wars.
Yeah, absolutely could be.
We then end our review of, a 10 days old teaser campaign, should I say, with the last entry. In case you missed it, 𝗖𝗍𝗵𝗵, an acronym for you. And what they've done is they've gone back to the trailer and they've taken stills from the trailer to get people to react, as we've just done a moment ago.
Yes.
And I can see, that happening more and more, online as well. So, as I say, it's been really quite interesting to look at a campaign from the very, very early start. It's the first time for us. So that gives us some scope to maybe make some predictions. What would you like to see next in terms of the marketing campaign? What do you think they could do to keep us, entertained and enthralled for the next 6 months?
Oh, I think it's got to be something that I alluded to before, some sort of game, some sort of treasure map to follow, or pieces of an artifact to start collecting bits and pieces from all over the world and putting them together into some sort of whole cube or whatever it might be. Or even, one of those the Indy does this quite often. You have the map and then you have the red line going along the map showing where something like that, something interactive that we can really become immersed in.
I would like to have that. I mean, as much as it's fun to have photos and videos of things that we've missed, because that's also my minor criticism of the campaign. Of course, they are US productions, although they are filming a lot in the UK, is it's quite difficult to attend, or it's quite difficult to know it's happening and so on. So something where it's not just US-centric would be lovely. So online is definitely a solution. Perhaps a little selfishly, I would love to win memorabilia. Because back to this idea of this is the end, this is the last one. So competitions and the likes, treasure hunt and finding real items. Even when we reviewed the Batman Returns, and there were some elements where you could literally vote, you could even take part in a kind of meta elements and so on. And we also reviewed the last Halloween installment where people could win a Zoom call with Jamie Lee Curtis. How about winning a Zoom call with Harrison Ford as part of the competition? That would be quite something, wouldn't it?
That would be quite something. One of the questions I want answering as well is, where's Marion? Now, Marion's an interesting character because she was in the original Raiders of the Lost Ark film, wasn't she? And then as far as I'm aware, she wasn't in the second two, but then she reappeared in the Crystal Skull, which you and I weren't massively keen on. And they got married at the end of it. So there's obviously a bit of a plot revelation to be made there, because as far as I'm aware, she's not in the film.
She's not, But to your point, she was really loved as a character. I think Raiders works really well as it is because of her. I mean, as you know, kind of storytelling 101, you need three characters. So you had Salah, you had Marion, and Indy, the same. So now, and I mean, if she's in the film as a surprise, I hope that her character is treated better than in Crystal Skull, because that was just, it was almost like a throwaway. Oh crap, we need to add her in, so that wasn't great. So listen, let's make a deal with our audience that we're going to go back to Indiana Jones 5: Dials of Destiny on the 30th of June 2023.
Yep.
When the movie is released, we can then look back at 6 months of campaign and see whether or not some of our predictions are proven to be correct.
Absolutely, Pascal. Do you know what? 2023 is going to be quite an exciting year for film marketing, because not only have we got Indy 5 coming out, but I've recently seen the first trailer, as far as I'm aware, for Mission Impossible 6.
Oh,
and that'll probably be coming out around about the same time, perhaps a bit later. I think it's in July. So we could do a similar trick that we've just done now with Indy with the Mission Impossible, because that trailer as well looks absolutely intriguing. So listen, everyone, thank you so much for tuning in. Whether you watched the video, whether you listened to the audio, thanks as always for your attention and your support. If you have any comments, leave a comment on the YouTube page. Fire us a tweet. Roger Edwards and Pascal Fintoni were separately there on Twitter. You can even talk to us on SpeakPipe. And Pascal, I always forget the SpeakPipe URL, but you have it memorized.
That's all right. Speakpipe.com/Two Geeks and a Marketing Podcast.
Fantastic. So everyone, thanks once again, and until next time, go out there and make sure that your marketing is done right. I was Roger Edwards and he was Pascal Fintoni.